The tennis world was already buzzing with energy. A young Filipina talent was carving her path through the Canadian Open, still riding the high from a groundbreaking title in Washington. Stands overflowed with fans. Flags waved everywhere. The phenomenon around her had taken hold of the event. Then, just hours before Alexandra Eala stepped onto center court for her third-round battle against Caty McNally, one statement hit with the force of a sudden storm. Agassi, an 8-time Grand Slam champion and one of the most respected figures the sport has produced, had been watching her progress with focused attention. Now he decided to share his thoughts. What he expressed left the tennis establishment surprised and placed a clear mark on Eala as the player everyone would need to contend with. Halting her advance at this stage no longer looked merely challenging. It appeared nearly out of reach. Those earlier comments from Martina Navratilova had already stirred the tour. Agassi's words struck with greater intensity. This was not simple admiration. It served as a direct signal, a notice to every competitor on the WTA that a significant new presence had emerged and that the existing hierarchy would have to respond or risk falling behind. And the message arrived precisely as Eala prepared to meet a tough opponent who had just eliminated the reigning Wimbledon champion. This is the account of how Alexandra Eala developed into the competitor that legends both respect and regard with caution, and how one champion's caution transformed a third-round contest into the most closely watched match of the tournament. The statement reached Toronto in the early morning. Agassi, the 8-time major winner whose career crossed different generations and whose observations still command attention, had at last offered his assessment of the Alexandra Eala surge. His manner remained calm. The impact was anything but. Agassi had followed her path from junior Grand Slam successes through the breakthrough stretch in Miami, the Wimbledon win over Iga Swiatek, and the historic victory at the DC Open. The Filipina had compelled the tennis community to take notice. Now Agassi added his perspective. She is not merely collecting wins, he observed. She is altering the way the game is played, the manner in which she anticipates opponents, the way she revises her strategy during a match, the capacity she shows to handle pressure. These qualities cannot be taught through repetition alone. True champions arrive with them. Eala possesses them in large measure. Then came the sentence that moved through every dressing room and broadcast booth. The WTA Tour needs to recognize what is happening. Eala is not only a challenge. She represents what lies ahead. If the rest of the field fails to find answers for her soon, they will spend the coming years observing her collect the major prizes. That is not speculation. That is a clear alert. The implication was plain. Agassi, a player who had confronted rising threats throughout his own celebrated career, was informing the tour that Eala was no short-lived wave. She was a talent of lasting significance, and those around her needed to approach her accordingly. The moment carried weight. Only days before, Navratilova had stated that containing Alex Eala at this point seemed almost impossible. Agassi's remarks joined that view. Two of the finest champions tennis has known were delivering the same message. Alexandra Eala was the genuine article. Why did Agassi select this particular time? The reason stood across the net. Katy McNally, the American who had just disrupted the tournament by overcoming reigning Wimbledon champion Linda Noskova. McNally arrived in Toronto determined to make a statement. The 24-year-old had spent seasons near the top 50, a competitor of evident ability still seeking the result that would mark her breakthrough. She had reached as high as world number 50 in June. Yet the defining victory had remained out of reach. Then the Canadian Open presented her with a second-round encounter against Noskova. The Czech player occupied the 6th seed, fresh from her first Grand Slam title at the All England Club, and most anticipated a straightforward progression. McNally rejected that expectation. She defeated Noskova 7-6, 6-1, only her second career win against a top 10 opponent, and suddenly the tennis world paid close attention. The result went beyond an upset. It served as a clear announcement. McNally had displayed the toughness and resolve that characterized players capable of extended runs. She managed the early pressure from the Wimbledon champion, took command, and held it throughout. She had beaten the Wimbledon champion. Observers called her dangerous. Now that same competitor stood between Eala and the quarterfinals. The pairing offered intensity. Both players carried forward momentum. Both had recently overcome strong opposition. Both still had points to establish. Eala entered the match on a 6-match winning sequence that included her landmark DC Open title. In the prior round, she had defeated fellow American Alycia Parks 6-1, 4-6, 6-2, a performance that illustrated her capacity to recover after dropping a set and finish under pressure. The win also resolved an Eala meeting from the Australian Open. McNally arrived with her own lift. The Noskova result had sent energy through the draw, and she intended to show the display was no isolated event. Their first career encounter was set as the final match of the evening session on centre court at the main stadium. Filipino supporters had already converted Eala's appearances into home contests, prompting organizers to place her on the primary stage because of ticket demand. McNally displayed no hesitation. "Come and watch us. I am really looking forward to competing with her. It will be an excellent contest," she remarked. She understood the environment that would greet her, the volume, the flags, the intensity, and she embraced it. The difference between the two was distinct. Eala was the preferred choice of the crowd. Every successful shot met with loud approval. McNally was the one who had interrupted the expected path and declined to exit without resistance. Agassi's caution raised the importance. Could Eala sustain the level the legends had recognized? Or would McNally deliver another unexpected outcome? What lent Agassi's comments additional strength was his precise understanding of Eala's game. He recognized more than natural ability. He saw a finished competitor who had improved every aspect of her craft. The stronger serve, the more intelligent choices of shot, the coverage in defense, and above all the calm under pressure had transformed a promising player into a true contender. Against Parks, she forced 56 unforced errors while making only 26 of her own. She claimed 71% of points on first serve and 52% on second serve. She generated 14 break chances and converted 5. It was measured aggression at a high standard. Yet it was the mental element that most impressed the greats. Eala no longer came apart when the flow of a match changed. She adapted and pressed on. "I think I needed to handle it point by point," she explained afterward. "I tried to start strong and take every chance that appeared." That method had developed through years at the Rafa Nadal Academy and numerous matches on the WTA Tour. It reflected the approach of a champion, and it clarified why Agassi and Navratilova had decided to speak. McNally brought her own assets. A flexible all-court competitor with a solid doubles background, she had reached the U.S. Open women's doubles final on 2 occasions, once alongside Coco Gauff and once with Taylor Townsend. Her skills at the net and her athletic movement made her a challenge on any surface. Still, Agassi's remarks kept the focus centered on Eala. The tennis world waited to learn whether the Filipina could live up to the level of the endorsement. Agassi's caution amounted to more than praise. It signaled acknowledgement that the sport was evolving. A 21-year-old from the Philippines had drawn interest across continents and positioned herself among the most demanding players to confront. Agassi had observed comparable arrivals before, young players who compelled the established structure to adjust. He considered Eala to belong in that group. The immediate consequence registered in Toronto. Her contest against McNally became the highlight of the evening. The full center court would respond with Filipino enthusiasm, flags in motion and voices rising. The setting would be intense. The broader perspective carried greater significance. Agassi was informing the tour that Eala would challenge for the largest titles in the years ahead and that the coming period of women's tennis would be shaped in part by her presence. The WTA Tour needs to wake up, he had stated, and the message was received. When Eala stepped onto center court to meet McNally, she carried those comments with her. She was no longer simply an emerging name. She was a player recognized by legends and identified as a serious force by one of the greatest champions the sport has produced. The expectation was genuine. Yet if Alexandra Eala had demonstrated anything, it was that expectation only refined her performance.